Hi everyone, Daljit Peterson here from astrolab21.com. And in this video we're going to be talking about Gemini season 2021. Can you believe it that Gemini season is already here? Really, Taurus season seemed to really kind of fly by. It seemed like just yesterday we were talking about the beginning of Taurus season. And of course, I think there's a reason why it feels like Taurus season moves so quickly and maybe Gemini season has come a bit early. That's because, in the past couple of weeks, we've had both Mercury and Venus move into the sign of Gemini ahead of the sun. So it's almost like we got a head start to Gemini season. And a lot of that sort of buzzy, chatty, airy, mental, intellectual energy of Gemini is already percolating within us ahead of the sun moving in, as it's about to do tomorrow on May 20th, on Thursday. So we're going to pull up the charts. We're going to take a look at the sort of general picture of what we can expect from some of the configurations over the course of this Gemini season. I'm going to keep it general because I do plan on doing it with a lot going on in this Gemini season. We are about to enter eclipse season, so we are going to have a total lunar eclipse coming up on May 26th. That will be followed a few days later by Mercury going retrograde in its own sign of Gemini, which is going to be an intense Mercury retrograde period. And I intend to do a deeper dive on that retrograde and maybe do Mercury retrograde through all the 12 signs, everyone's rising sign. So we'll kind of save some of that for the subsequent video. But we'll take a look at the chart. We'll get into it. Before we go, let's kind of just talk generally about what we're moving into with Gemini season, this sort of seasonal shift that takes place. We're moving from, the fixed sign of Taurus, which is an earth sign, into the mutable sign of Gemini, which is an air sign. And this is the third and final phase of spring, right? We started with Aries, the cardinal sign, begin to initiate the spring season. Then we got consolidated in the fixed sign of Taurus, and now we're taking that energy and we're mutating it, we're changing it. We're going to disseminate it, distribute it, share it, evolve it through that mutable sign of Gemini. So it's a transition from, we've peaked in the middle of Taurus season was the peak of spring. Now we're moving in, we're transitioning, we're mutating into summer season, which will inaugurate with cardinal Cancer next month when we hit the summer solstice. So when I talk about Gemini, I talk about sort of mind over matter, right? We've been focused on more the physical, the sensual, the practical, while we've been experiencing the sun's journey through Taurus, and now we're moving into more of a mental sphere, the areas of the mind, ideas, communication, self-expression, right? Language, very much more social interaction. So you're going to sense, and I think we already are, of course, a lot of this is contingent on what's happening in the bigger social sphere with the easing of restrictions, with people getting vaccinated. We're getting a little bit more of an opportunity to socialize, and certainly all of this Gemini energy is really reinforcing that desire, that urge, that need that we all have to communicate and to express and to share, to commune, to gather, to interface with our friends, with our family, with our communities. That's all very Gemini energy. So it's certainly a buzz. There's sort of a chatty, buzzy feel that's going on right now that will persist throughout this month. Of course, with the eclipse and with the Mercury retrograde, we're going to see some shifts in that energy. So it's going to start the month out really sort of on a very bright, optimistic, very delicious week, I think, the first week of Gemini season, with the Sun, Mercury, and Venus all moving through the sign. And then once we hit the eclipse and move into the retrograde period, that is going to shift for us a little bit. So we want to sort of be alerted to that. So we'll jump up into the charts. And before I do, of course, just a quick reminder, at the website astrolab21.com, you can book a reading here with me. I've updated my services. Just one way you can support what I'm doing here on the channel. A menu of different reading options that I'm offering right now. I've got a couple coming up this week with some of my viewers here, so I'm very excited about that. Also have launched a Patreon page, so I've got 3 membership levels there with some different incentives. And last but not least, I guess it is least because it's the smallest, but a small gesture or token of your appreciation, you can buy me a cup of coffee for $3 if you like what I'm doing here. So 3 different ways to support what I'm doing on the channel. And without further ado, now we'll jump into taking a look at the Sky Now chart. So here we are on May 19th, the last day of Taurus season. We can see the sun here at 29 degrees of Taurus. And if we move forward one day to tomorrow, which is Thursday, May 20th, we'll see the sun will be moving, or ingressing, as we say in astrology, into the sign of Gemini. And this is the inauguration of Gemini season. And as I mentioned, Gemini season got a bit of a head start because we've had both Mercury and Venus moving through Gemini for the last couple weeks, really. And so that energy is already pretty palpable. If you think about the combination of those two symbols, right? You've got Mercury, which is how we communicate, how we express, combined with Venus, how we feel, how we emote, how we relate, what we attract, what we're attracted to. This is a real sensual, I call it a love buzz, right? It's like all of our communication, all of our expressions is getting this Venusian enhancement, right? Our words are a little more sensual, right? We might be writing a little bit more poetically at this time, right? All of our conversations have a real sort of pleasurable quality to them. So, like I said, this is sort of the symbolism of this first week of Gemini season, and it's really, I don't know, it's one of those nice, it's a relief. I think we're all feeling this sense of, Gemini is all about, communication. It's about short distance travel. It's about our neighborhoods and that interactivity within our immediate environment, right? So there's this sense, there's this buzz, there's this energy that we all want to get out into, at least into our immediate world, right? Where we normally have a lot of interface and exchange and opportunities to express ourselves and to communicate and to share ideas, right? That's very human nature that we have. We're very social creatures. And certainly during Gemini season, we really want to express that social aspect of our nature. So I think a lot of, here in LA, we're seeing a lot of buzz going on. People are starting to get out and interact and go to dinner. Restaurants are opening. All of that's happening, which is really nice. I think relief for a lot of us. Something I want to point out, just as the sun moves into that 0-degree position at Gemini, it's going to be making an exact square with Jupiter, which has just recently moved into Pisces. And I just did a video about Jupiter in Pisces. We're kind of dipping our toes in the waters of Pisces, so to speak. It's going to spend a few more weeks in Pisces before it itself will go retrograde and end up moving back into Aquarius for much of the rest of the year. But just with this sort of, it's a nice sort of keynote that sort of initiates Gemini season with this Sun square Pisces, Jupiter in Pisces. It has a great deal of mutability to it, right? 2 mutable signs in square aspect. So what are we getting here with, Sun and Gemini? And if you know people who are Sun and Gemini, you know that they're very mutable type people. They're very changeable. They're very flexible. They can change their minds. They can change their behavior. They can change their names often in a moment's notice, right? And so during the sun's transit through Gemini, we all get to have a little bit of that Gemini quality of mutability, of change, right? We can try out different modalities, try out different styles of communication, different styles of dress, different styles of presentation. And I think with this energy here coming from Jupiter and Pisces, well, now we're getting the mutability of Pisces, which is a much bigger frame, right? This is about our spirituality, our connection to source, our connection to the cosmic energy, our willingness to really go deep and immerse ourselves, our ability to be mythical and poetic and deeply expressive. It's a very creative sign and a very creative energy because Jupiter is quite at home in the sign of Pisces. It's one of the ancient rulers of Pisces, so it's very dignified. It's exalted in Pisces. It's at home there. as I talked about in that video on Jupiter and Pisces. It's going to be a really nice year for Jupiter's transit through Pisces. I think we're all going to look forward to that from 2021 into 2022. But again, a nice little preview here in this aspect certainly will reinforce that sense of a connection to the bigger picture, right? Jupiter always brings in a broader frame, a bigger worldview. It invites us to look beyond ourselves, look at all that's possible, to expand, to grow, right? To add to our wealth, whether it's a wealth, material wealth, whether it's our intellectual or informational wealth, a wealth of knowledge, right? We're probably going to get a lot of opportunity for some bigger, more information to come our way. And certainly if it's information that has sort of this spiritual nature to it, a great time to do a deep dive into spiritual research, for instance. If you've been curious, Gemini, curious about any sort of spiritual, religious, philosophical type of subjects, you're probably getting a lot of supportive energy to expand your worldview in that regard. So it's a really nice start to the month, I think, to Gemini season. I'm going to move forward a couple days. If we move to the 22nd of May, and I'm going to bring Neptune, which is also in Pisces. And what we're going to see is the first of what is going to be three squares between Mercury in Gemini and Neptune in Pisces. Okay, because as we mentioned, we're going to have Mercury retrograde during the course of the next month. It's going to hit this point, and then it's going to retrograde back over it, and then move forward a third time. So we're going to get three of these square formations with Mercury and Neptune. So similar but not to the same, right? We have the same two archetypes being constellated here when we're talking about Gemini and Pisces, right? This mutability, which is really nice. But now we're getting our communication style, our mental, our mind is getting stimulated by Neptune, which is the modern ruler of Pisces, right? And really we associate Neptune with that, the transcendental, the cosmic, the poetic, the artistic, the creative. Such a nice energy, really, like this whole period. Of course, it does have its downside. There's a shadow to all of these archetypes. It can also be delusional, and it can be escapist. It can be connected to alcohol and drug addiction, right? We can lose ourselves in the waters of Neptune quite easily, particularly in Pisces. And I think there's something much bigger going on. This is a much longer cycle that we're all in. But this period over the next few weeks where we're going to get this Mercury connection. So our minds are going to be affected. Our thinking is going to be spiritualized in a way. It's going to be given and imbued this much more artistic, creative, poetic opportunity. But we also want to be cautious and careful and guard against deluded thinking, right? It's illusions, getting lost in fantasy, ungrounded in reality. So we want to just be aware of the opportunities and the dangers of this kind of configuration, because it's all these archetypes are like a double-edged sword, as I like to say. But that's a theme that's going to be reinforced over the course of the next few weeks, all throughout this Gemini season. Okay, I'm going to jump forward a couple days later to May 24th. I want to bring in a couple other planets to start looking at, because if we look at the Moon and Saturn and Uranus, what we're going to see is a T-square being formed between the Moon in Scorpio opposite Uranus in Taurus, forming a T-square to Saturn in Aquarius. And of course, I bring this up because this is just that monthly trigger of this long-standing square that we've been talking about all year between Saturn and Uranus. And since Saturn went retrograde earlier in the month, it's the first time the Moon has had this contact with a retrograde Saturn. I think it's going to be interesting as Saturn starts to back up over these degrees of Aquarius where it's been moving for the first half of the year. I expect that we're going to have some kind of revisit, readjustments in the areas related to this configuration that we're having to deal with and grapple with all throughout this year of 2021. So, just to remind you about that, Uranus and Taurus, very disruptive energy, very sudden changes. It's trying to shake things up. It being in square with Saturn, which is resistant to change, that's trying to hold everything together, to maintain structure, to maintain boundaries, to maintain law and order, right? This disruption, this urge from Uranus to disrupt the status quo, to overthrow, to topple, to revolutionize the establishment. It's an energy that, we see it playing out for sure in society at large. And of course, we're witnessing that kind of energy sort of percolating through all of us on an individual soul level. So just want you to be aware of that. This trigger, this moon configuration could really trigger a response in us sometime during that day. It's really that Scorpio moon. I think about that being revealing of things that are hidden, things that are secret, some covert type of emotions, things that we're unconscious of, things that the collective is unconscious of, some shadow elements that could come out, and maybe something to sort of percolate into the culture and through the information ecology, if you will, during this configuration, because it's pretty intense square. Now that's going to bring us, if we go just 2 days later, that's hours, let's get back to days here. If I go 2 days later, and this is the configuration for what is going to be a total lunar eclipse, and I'm going to try to bring it up so we get it exact here. We have the moon in Sagittarius opposing the sun in Gemini. And why is this an eclipse? Well, because the full moon is occurring on the nodal axis of the moon. And if I bring in the nodes here, we'll see that the south node is in Sagittarius and the north node is in Gemini. And these, this is something that we've been dealing with for the last 8 or 10 months, right? It's about a 18-month period where the nodes will move in constant retrograde motion through each of the signs of the zodiac. So we've been working through this polarity between the past, the south node in Sagittarius, old ideas, old philosophies, old approaches, old ways of looking at the world, in contrast with the north node moving through Gemini, new and future ideas, new ways of thinking, new communications, new systems, new educational opportunities, right? New everything. Think about Gemini and that it being our sort of cultural compass, if you will, is pointing into Gemini, and we're being caused to reflect on the past, which is the south node, on Sagittarius, the more traditional philosophical source of where we're coming from. So now that we're going to have this full moon on this axis, it's going to highlight those themes for us in a very intense way, because that's what eclipses do. They just focus the intensity. And I thought it'd be cool just so you can see sort of what's going on when we have an eclipse. And I'll pull up the solar system here, and we can see from the Earth's perspective. Here we have the sun in Gemini, and Mercury and Venus are also in Gemini. But what happens on an eclipse is when we have a full moon, right, it's in the opposite sign of Sagittarius, and that puts the Earth right in between the sun and the moon. And because this is occurring in the part of the sky which is the nodes of the moon, where the moon moves above and below the ecliptic, it creates this scenario where the light of the sun is blocked by the Earth from actually hitting the moon. And that's what causes the eclipse phenomenon. It causes the moons normally reflecting all that light from the sun, but because of this unique positioning that occurs a couple times a year, we end up with an eclipse. So that's what's going on, and that's what we'll be witnessing. Partially visible, I think, in North America, those parts of the planet where it'll be a full and visible lunar eclipse. But this is the sort of geophysical phenomenon that's taking place, and why eclipses are so intense and prominent. There's this very specific alignment that's going on in the solar system between the sun, the earth, and the moon. It's really powerful. That energy, when the sun's energy gets eclipsed, or by wrapping around and being blocked out by the earth, there's a real intensity that takes place here. And so anytime and whatever sort of astrological symbolism is being reinforced at that time is really, it's like a laser focus. So this full moon, this eclipse, with the moon in Sagittarius and the sun in Gemini, and all of this general Gemini energy, with, as we've been talking about, really going to be called to we're going to be getting, I think, downloads. This is always a time of massive downloads from the universe. You're going to get messages about the future direction. Where are you going, right? And we've all been experiencing this push-pull dynamic with these nodal positionings over the last, sort of year or so. And it will continue, and it'll be coming to really sharp focus. So I'm encouraging everyone to really pay attention, particularly on the day of the eclipse on May 26th. Take note of any sort of insights that you might get, any kind of intuition, any feelings, particularly about what you can leave behind and where you're going, right? Think about the old scripts, right? The old stories we've been telling ourselves. What are the scripts that need to be rewritten? Right? Do we need to do an upgrade to our operating code, our personal OS? Right? Are there some new modalities that we should be exploring and experiencing? Are there some new psychotechnologies or spiritual practices that we might want to incorporate or explore or investigate at this time? And one good practice is, maybe just really write these insights down. Write an intention on the day of this full moon, on the day of this eclipse. Write it on a piece of paper, fold it up, and then just tuck it away somewhere safe or secret or precious. Put it on your altar or in a place that's special for you. And we're just going to leave it there for like 6 months. And then we'll revisit that in 6 months from now in December, when we get the next lunar eclipse, which will occur in the opposite signs. We'll have the sun in Sagittarius and the full moon will be in Gemini. And we'll just revisit those and see what might have manifested over the course of that 6-month period, because that's the opportunity that eclipses present us with. It's this 6-month window where a seed gets planted. So whatever seed we plant during this eclipse is likely to be able to be nurtured and to grow into fruition over the course of that 6 months. So interesting experiment to see what manifests, right? And as I say, what do we have to lose by practicing these small rituals and aligning ourselves with this energy? It's really what it's all about. And I think you'd be really kind of pleasantly surprised by the subtle magic that can work in our consciousness, and what these symbols and what these planets are really trying to call us to recognize and to get in sync and to get into rhythm with these energetic patterns that are present. Now, and enjoy this eclipse, because, like I said, just 3 days later, if I go back here to the days, on May 29th, we're going to get, at some point that day, there it goes, Mercury going retrograde at 24 degrees at Gemini, sometime almost exactly at my birthday. We'll get Mercury retrograde. And so this begins a 3-week period of retrograde. Mercury is going to be retrograde from May 29th to June 23rd. So it's going to back up all the way to 16 degrees of Gemini. And again, it's going to make another connection to, it'll meet the sun, in conjunct the sun. It'll have its inferior conjunction, which will begin a new cycle, and something I want to talk about more in a subsequent video. I don't want to get too into it here, but basically when Mercury retrograde backs up and conjuncts the sun again, that's considered the inferior conjunction, right? It's between the sun and the earth. And that really is the beginning of a new cycle of Mercury. Continue retrograde and then moves forward. And up until that period of its superior conjunction, where it meets the sun again, there's a real opportunity. A new energy is being born in our communication style, in our mental capacity. It's a cycle that starts. So that's the good thing about Mercury retrograde, this opportunity to start a new cycle in each retrograde period. But of course, as we all have come to learn and appreciate and have to deal with, is that there are some real downsides to Mercury retrograde periods. And this one's going to be no exception, and in fact, might be more intense than most, because Mercury is retrograding through its own sign of Gemini. So expect more than usual, the amount of the usual retrograde period hijinks of miscommunications and missed appointments and electronical failures and slips of the tongue and all the kind of typical things we've come to expect from Mercury retrograde periods. Of course, the reminder to don't initiate anything new, don't sign contracts, don't get any sort of elective or cosmetic surgery during Mercury and retrograde periods. It's a time to review what's already happened. So anything that was initiated up to that point, go back over the details. And particularly, the plus side of this Mercury retrograde occurring in Gemini is that we really are going to be able to really get the benefit of the revisit, the relive, the revise, the renew, the reapproaching of all of the things, all the irons we've had in the fire. Take time to reassess all of that over the course of that 3-week period, and you'll most likely get more of the benefit out of it, because I think it is going to be a bit of a crazy time, though, in the culture. Unfortunately, I think this Mercury retrograde will probably play out in some very bizarre ways within the media and within the sort of information ecology at large. I expect a lot of sort of crossed wires. And I think we already got a little preview of that if you consider what happened with Elon Musk's appearance on Saturday Night Live last week, right? Where a joke, right? He made a parody, if you will, which is a very Mercury Gemini type of thing to do, right? Mercury is the trickster and the jokester. But he made a joke about Dogecoin and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and the next day, all of a sudden, the financial markets and the crypto markets went crazy and up and down and crazy fluctuations, right? We think about Uranus and Taurus, and we've been talking about that with financial markets. So all of these things aligned, and that was with Mercury direct, right? And that was with a good sort of communication environment. Now imagine what's going to happen as we go retrograde. I just think that, Mercury retrograde in Gemini can constellate things like, bad data, right? Misinterpreted statistics, poor financial advice, just poor advice in general. So just, you want to be extra diligent and aware and conscious and cautious about any information that you're going to receive over the course of this period, because it's likely going to need some correction. It likely has some missing pieces to it that could be really costly if you're not aware of that. So just, I guess, a word of caution. As I've said in my newsletter, you want to keep your right mind during this Gemini season, because you're going to need it. You're going to need that clarity. You're going to need that focus. You're going to need that discernment to navigate what I think is going to be a challenging time. I think I'm going to leave it at that, because those are really the big points of this Gemini season that we want to get to, right? This eclipse and the retrograde period. There's some other details that we'll talk about, and I'll bring up in the next episode when I talk about Mercury retrograde in greater detail. And as I said, I'll likely go through all 12 signs based on your rising sign, so we can see what area of the chart this retrograde is taking place in. Also, we'll be able to talk about how that might be connected to Jupiter which is in Pisces as well. So it might be an interesting way of looking at both of those astrological factors, which are going to be really prominent for us over the course of really the next month, over much of this Gemini season. So, all right, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you're now informed to have a much more productive, a more mentally stimulating, a more socially pleasing Gemini season. I think we've all earned it. We all deserve to have a little bit of that human connection, to get out there and be mercurial, be our Gemini selves, and enjoy this time we have together. As always, if you like the video, appreciate it if you would like and subscribe it. Really trying to grow the subscriber base here on the channel. Click the notification and bell as well, and you'll know when the next video comes out. Particularly, I think this one on Mercury Retrograde is going to be super helpful for everyone. All right, until then, we'll see you next time. Sat Nam, everyone.